What if you could build complex software using AI coding agents to give you the competitive advantage in the AI marketplace without any coding experience? By creating solutions beyond what automation platforms like N8N and Make.com can deliver. Today, I'll show you how to use agents to code powerful content automation features from scratch, like how to scrape videos from TikTok or Instagram Reels or virtually any other popular video platform, helping you eliminate costly monthly API subscriptions or to help you build your own SaaS product. With 35 years of coding experience and 2 7-figure tech businesses under my belt, I can give you unique insights and perspective on how to properly integrate AI coding agents into your solutions and your business. By the end of this video, you'll know how to use AI coding agents to build advanced software beyond most people's capability, especially in AI automation, letting you command premium rates and access lucrative opportunities. I'll work live showing my thought process, bug fixing approach, and deployment steps so you can easily integrate these techniques. So here's the plan. I'll cover AI agent coding fundamentals. Then I'll dive into a live unscripted session with Cursor and Claude Code. You'll witness my complete workflow from GitHub management to brainstorming solutions to problem-solving strategies and see how I leverage AI to generate software that distinguishes me from the typical AI gurus. It's surprisingly simple with the right approach. All right, so here's the agenda. First, we're going to go over the project that we're going to add features to, the No-Code Architects Toolkit. It's a free tool that you can download to help you eliminate costly monthly API subscriptions. I'm going to show you the process of downloading that code onto your computer from GitHub. Then we're going to add a few features to this toolkit live. We're going to add a TikTok and Instagram Reels video scraper so that you can download videos from any popular video platform. This will allow you to eliminate the need for platforms like Appify. Then we're going to add a media conversions endpoint that will allow you to convert one file format to another. This will eliminate the need for platforms like Claude Convert. Then we'll add an API that will allow you to cut video and media into multiple parts. So if you had a video and you wanted to splice it into 3 different sections, we'll add the ability to do that. And if we have time, we'll add another endpoint that allows us to dynamically add video overlays to other videos to automate the creation of videos with B-roll. Then I'll show you how to check everything back into GitHub. We'll review the build and deployment system. And then after we build out these features with Cursor and Claude Code, I'll talk about which AI coding agent that I prefer. And then make sure to stick around to the end where I'll give you the #1 insight that you need to know if you want to integrate AI coding agents into your business. If you're frustrated by intimidating black screens of code or hitting walls with AI coding tools, you're not alone. It's not just frustrating. It prevents you from creating professional grade solutions that command premium rates. Today, I'll help you uncover these exact barriers. Let's get into it. All right, so first, let me give you a brief overview of the project that we're going to be modifying and adding features to using AI coding agents, the No-Code Architects Toolkit. The No-Code Architects Toolkit API eliminates monthly subscriptions by consolidating common API functionalities into a single free API. So let's provide a few examples. Here's a video of me on the school games. It's a short clip of me talking, but you can see it does not have any captions. So I've already downloaded this code and I've deployed it to DigitalOcean right here. How this toolkit works is you basically are able to download this code, you can compile it, and then you can deploy it to your own server so that you can make API calls to the server in order to caption videos, create thumbnails, concatenate videos together. You can also transcribe videos all for free. So here I'm in a tool called Postman, which allows you to test API calls. And I'm going to automatically caption that video simply by sending it to my DigitalOcean server here, which is running the No-Code Architects Toolkit code. So you send the video to the API along with a bunch of other settings like the color and the font size and the specific font. And then I'll go ahead and run that. It'll process. And then you'll see that the toolkit responds with a new video. I can click here and download the video. It'll automatically download. And then from here, I can click on the caption video. And here you can see we've automatically transcribed and added the captions directly to the video. And like I said, you can also transcribe videos. This function here allows you to send a video and a few different settings. You can get back just the transcription, or you can also include the SRT. Then we can run this as well. It's going to transcribe this video and also bring us back the SRT file. Then we can scroll down here and see the response. And now we have the transcript right here. And then we also have the SRT file that we could use for captions or other purposes. So what you can see here is that we built our own free API server that takes the functionality from a lot of paid services that you have to pay a monthly subscription for. And we simply wrote our own code to replace these and add them into our own server that we can call and deploy And now we can get rid of all these other subscriptions. All right, so now that we've gone over the NCA toolkit, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the GitHub checkout process and how to think about GitHub projects and branches so that we can then get into adding our own features in the proper way. So if you're not familiar, what GitHub is a platform where developers and now non-developers using AI can store their code and share it with others. Now you can have private and public repositories. That's what they're called. In this case, the No-Code Architects Toolkit is a free tool and it's open to the public, and there's instructions on how to install it. There's also documentation on how to use all of the various endpoints. And I'll talk about this more in just a moment, but there are also different branches of the code because as you add different features, you can actually keep these different features separated and you can test them independently. And then when they're ready, you can merge those back into the build branch, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then also the main branch. This is the default branch where all of the main code ends up coming back to. So you can imagine as you add new features or if you have bugs, you're going to have to create these other branches and build those out before you can merge them back into the main code base where people will typically go to get the most recent version. Obviously, when you're creating new features or fixing things, you don't want to mess with a working version of your system. So there are various different ways of interacting with code from GitHub. I prefer to use the terminal to download that code and check it out. The official term to access the code is called cloning the repository. So if I come here to the No-Code Architects Toolkit and I come here to code, I can come here to the SSH section here and I can copy this URL to the clipboard. And then I can come back to my terminal. I can type git, I can type clone, and then I can put that address right here. And then I can go ahead and hit enter. I already have an existing folder with that name. So I'm going to go ahead and put it into something different, YouTube demo. It's going to clone that repository into the YouTube demo folder. Normally it would use the No-Code Architects Toolkit directory as a default, but since I already had that, it gave us that previous error. So now it has downloaded all of the code. So I could go into YouTube demo, and if I do an ls on a PC, you'll likely type dir to get the contents of the folder. But here you can see we have all of these different files here, which is really mimicking the files that you see here in the GitHub interface. Now, once you have this downloaded, then you are also able to check out different branches. So if I type git status, what it's going to tell us right now is that it's on the main branch. So remember I was talking to you about how we have these different branches here. If I open this up, it starts off on that default main branch, but I could also say git checkout build, and now it's going to switch to the build branch. And in this particular project, we use the build branch to merge everything into and to test before we move it to the main branch. So you can consider this a staging branch where we do all the final testing before we merge it into the main branch and we affect everybody else's toolkit. You want to be careful about how you roll out your feature updates so that you don't interrupt people that are using the main production branch. You don't want to unnecessarily introduce bugs into the main branch, so you use the build branch to test everything thoroughly before it actually gets merged in. And I'll show you the process of doing so. So from here, we're in the build branch. So if we wanted to add a new feature, I could type something like git branch feature / add for TikTok downloader. That's going to create a new branch off of the build branch. So if you imagine we have our main branch here, this is our production branch, and then we also have our build branch. We can also create off separate features here, feature 1, feature 2. We can build them all separately, and feature 3. We can work on all of these features independently. Then they can all be merged back into the branch, the build branch, and then the build branch can be merged back into the main branch. So now that I created this new branch, I can simply check it out, git checkout, then I can just copy paste. Now we've checked out the feature branch that I created just a moment before. And then if I were to go into Cursor and open up a new project, we'll open up the YouTube demo. Now we can see we have all of the code here. I could open up one of these pieces of code. I could make a change. I'm just going to add a comment here. And then if I were to save that file and then go back to the terminal and type git status, you're going to see here that it has noticed that we've made a simple change to the app.py. That's the app.py file that I'm in. You can see that it has a comment here. I could type git diff, and then it's going to actually show you the files and the actual difference here with this little green plus here. If I had removed a line, I'll come back here. Let's just remove this here. Save it, come back to the terminal, do a git diff once more. Notice that it's telling us we've removed this line and we've added these here. So now obviously these are changes that I would not want to make. But if I did, I could come back, I could say git status, I could say git add app.py. That is going to tell Git that we want to add these changes to this branch. Then I could say git commit. Then I could briefly describe the changes that I made to the different files that I want to check in. So I could type something like added comments and removed max q length env var. If I really did this, it would actually break the toolkit. But just for demonstration purposes, close quote. Now I've committed that to the repository. And then from here, I could do a git push origin, and I could actually push this feature back up to GitHub. So here I would say git push origin, and origin happens to be GitHub. Some of these terms will take a little bit of time to get used to, but then I could simply add this here. And if I were to push this, it would actually push it up to GitHub. And I could come here and you can see that it was actually pushed. I could check it out, and then I would be able to come to our app file, and you can see we added the comment and we also removed that max q length, this line right here. So now obviously this is not something that I would actually want to commit. I would actually break the toolkit by doing that. But I did want to take a second to explain how you create branches and how they interact with each other, and then how they actually upload back into GitHub. And I could compare one branch to another. And I'd also like to encourage you to feel free to use AI to help you with these commands. So if I wanted to find the difference between one branch and another, I could always come up to ChatGPT or Claude and I could say, how do I compare one Git branch to another? And so here it's going to show you a few different strategies that you can try. I'm going to use this one here, git diff branch A and branch B. So I'll come back to the terminal and then I'll compare this feature ... with the build branch. Then I can hit enter. And notice it's going to compare the current branch with the existing build branch. And so here you can see that the build branch doesn't have the comment, and it also includes this line that we removed. All right, so now let's jump into the first feature that we want to add into the No Code Architects toolkit today, which is a TikTok and IG Reels video scraper. I use this in content automation all the time. I want to download a specific TikTok off of their platform. Typically, I use a paid service called Appify. It's a pretty cool service, honestly. It does a lot of different things, but it does cost money. And if I can do this for free, it'd be much better. So the question is, how do I add in the ability to download or scrape these TikToks or these Instagram Reels, or really any video from any popular video platform? So how you arrive at the different features that you want to make is going to vary. I want to replicate this because this is something that I do on a regular basis, and it costs quite a bit of money, especially if you're downloading lots of videos. So in this particular case, I happen to know that there's an open source project on GitHub similar to the NCA toolkit that actually does this. But I also encourage people to really use Claude and ChatGPT to help you do some of this initial research. A lot of the time what I find is that when people want to use code, they'll jump into something like Cursor, which has the ability to write code, and we're going to demonstrate this in just a few minutes. They jump right into something like Cursor and they say, hey, add me a TikTok downloader. Now, you might get good results or you might not, but that's the problem, right? Is that people are going into this asking fairly broad questions to the system, and your results are mixed. Sometimes the agent is going to get it right and sometimes it won't. But I can promise you, if you do a bit more research, help isolate how to solve the problem a bit before you actually get into coding, it will help a lot. So I could go to Claude here and let's just see what happens. I've never done this. I don't know what it's going to do. Is there an open source tool that will allow me to download videos from TikTok or other popular video hosting platforms? So let's just see what it says. So right off the top, it lists this tool here. And I actually knew that this is a tool and it is going to be the tool I was going to use in this demonstration. But the point I wanted to make here is that it's going to give you a list of tools that are possible candidates for what you want to do, depending on what feature you're trying to add. And you can do your own research into these tools to see if they make sense for what you want to do. So here we can actually investigate this, and it gives us a link actually. We can click on this, we can click OK, and then we can see here that we have this tool here and we can read about it. We can do some of our own research. We can see which platforms it supports. We can read some of its documentation. And then of course you could investigate some of these other tools and options as well. And what I can promise you is that if you do a bit of your own research and you use your own instinct to determine whether it makes sense to use this tool or that tool, it's going to help your coding agent a lot. So then from here, I'm going to go ahead and pretend that I did the research. I already knew about this tool myself, and so I'm going to go ahead and use this. But still, I'm probably not ready to code yet. I'm going to continue to converse with Claude a bit more before I move to the coding, and I'll explain how and why. So now the next thing that I might do here is I might ask Claude to help me build out the framework for the prompt I'm going to use when I jump back into Cursor, which has all of my code here that we're going to modify, and I can drop that prompt in right here. I'm going to use Claude to help me generate the prompt before I ever come here. So we'll jump back to Claude, and I'm going to say, I'm developing a new API endpoint for the No Code Architects Toolkit. I've included a sample piece of code for reference. And then what I would do is I would actually open up my Finder. I would go into the No Code Architects Toolkit, and then I would go find an existing route or endpoint here, some code that shows an example of a previous endpoint or API call, like the media transcribe. And I would just add it in here so it has some basic understanding of the application I'm trying to modify. And now remember in Postman here, where we were calling the different commands in the NCA toolkit, in this particular example, we had these payloads that we would send the API. In this case, this was the one that created the tweet pic, but if we go back up to the captions, this is an API call, and we're sending it all of these different options in order to caption a video, or to transcribe a video, or to get a thumbnail from a video. So one of the first things that we need to figure out is, okay, what is the payload going to be for our TikTok and IG downloader? Well, since we're downloading TikToks and Instagram Reels or videos from other popular video platforms, we're most likely going to pass the URL. So I might ask it some initial questions like, I'm developing this new API endpoint. Do you think we could add YTDLP into the project so that we could download TikToks? I'm thinking the payload might look like something like this. And then what I might do is I might come over here to Postman, and then I might just take an existing endpoint here and I might duplicate it. And then I would come to the body and I would think, okay, well, what am I going to send to it? Well, we're going to send a video URL. I might remove this and just give Claude a sample payload. And I might just put that in here. And I might just ask it what it thinks. But I'll tell it not to write code yet, but just to give me some advice on the payload. And so then it was able to look at my request and also look at what the actual tool can do, YTDLP, and then was able to give us some suggestions. And then you can see here that it changed the video URL to source URL. Now, just because I'm the developer of this particular toolkit, I don't want to do that. It's going to break away from the convention. But at least you can start to have a dialogue from whatever perspective that you have with Claude before you actually have it write any code. Because it's also suggesting to you here that it knows some options that exist in this other tool. So this tool here has a lot of different options. It doesn't just download it, but you can tell it to download different qualities. There's a lot of documentation that you can look here, but there's all these different options that are available to you that you can also expose in your API, like quality. So now to keep it simple, I'm going to go ahead and just focus in on the URL. And I also know that it does more than just video. Like if you wanted to download audio as well, it would do that. Like if there's a video and you only wanted the audio, it would allow you to do that. So instead of calling it a video URL, I'm going to call it a media URL. All right, so from here, I feel like I've done enough research. I found the main library. I've thought about how I want to set up the API call. I know what I want to get back from the API call. I'm going to head back down to the terminal. Here I'm in the directory that we checked out earlier in the video. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the original download of the No-Code Architects Toolkit code that I had previously. It was already set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do a git status, check out what build I'm at, or I mean branch, and we are on the build branch. This is typically where I branch off from. So I'm going to go ahead and do git branch. And again, I'm going to do feature video download. Then I'll do a git checkout, copy and paste it. And now we've switched to that branch. And now I'm going to head over to cursor, and I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right folder. I'm going to go into the No-Code Architects Toolkit, open up this project. And now we've got all the code on the left-hand side. All the code on the left-hand side, I can open up code here, and I can also access the chat window. This is what allows us to chat with our AI agent. Because I have the caption videos file already open, it's assuming that that's what I'm wanting to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and close that so it doesn't get the wrong impression. In fact, if I'm going to add anything there, I'd probably open up the main app file. Then I'm going to come over here, and I'm simply going to come back to GitHub. I'm going to grab the GitHub URL here. I'm going to grab this, come back to cursor. We'll say add, and then I'll put the GitHub project here. To this project as a new endpoint /v1 video. Actually, let's do media, because remember we can download audio as well, so I don't want to put video. I'll put media /download, and then we'll say take media URL as the API payload and return the downloaded file as file URL in the response. So again, if I come to Postman, what I'm basically describing is what am I sending the API and what am I getting back in the response here. And then just with that, I'll let it go and let's see what happens. So it looks like it's adding a new file. Let's check out what it's added here. Well, here's the requirements. It looks like it added in the YTDLP to the requirements text. This is the file that is used to load up all the different libraries that we need inside the NCA toolkit. It added a new route. So if you see here in the routes here, this is what defines all of the new API calls. It created a new V1 media download route, and it looks like it's done here. So then you'll want to read everything that it says carefully just to see if it's doing what you want. And it's giving me a sample API request here, which is very similar to what you might do here in Postman. And then it's saying the response here. One thing that I'm noticing here, the way it's returning this file URL, it's returning a local file. But what the toolkit actually does, and so this is where you need to be aware of what you're actually building, is it uploads any files that it creates to the cloud and then responds with that cloud URL. So I'm noticing that it didn't do that. So now before I even try to run this, I'm going to respond back and say, hey, look, it doesn't look like you're responding the way other routes do. So if I come to this other route here, media transcribe, the way it responds is different. So I'm just going to come back here and say, it looks like you are not uploading the file to the cloud as other endpoints do. Refer to the V1 media transcribe endpoint route and mimic the way it uploads the file and also returns the result. So in this case, because I have experience building this particular project, I can give it specific feedback. So it looks like it's made some changes. So now we can see it has updated everything, but still I can tell that it's using the code from media transcribe, and it's confusing and trying to do the same thing. In the media transcribe, which we just referenced, it does have this concept of direct and cloud-based responses. In this case, we don't need that. So again, I'm going to tell it to disregard and only upload and return the file URL and not all of this other information, as that is covered by a different part of the application. Basically, it's adding in functionality that we didn't request. So I'm just going to say it. You're adding in functionality that was not requested. There is no response type in the new download endpoint, and you're also returning additional information beyond the file URL. Only respond with the file URL and remove the direct and cloud options from the payload. So there, it took that out, and now it's simplified everything here. It's still responding as an array. So if I take a look at some of these other examples here, and this is some of the work you have to do, is that you have to take a look and see what it's doing and reference it to other items in the project, or if you're writing things from scratch. Notice that this one doesn't return an array, it's just the URL. So I'm gonna give it a more verbose instruction this time. I'm just gonna copy this. Do not return the file URL in an array, similar to this. And then I'm gonna update the endpoint here so it doesn't get confused. Media, download, and I'll hit send, jump back to download, and there it corrected it. So now it looks like it's doing what we need here. So now I can go ahead and accept the changes. So we're getting close to being able to give this a try. I'll accept the changes here in this file, and I will accept the changes here in the app file. Make sure everything is saved. Now I can jump back to my project and I can go ahead and try running it. This is how you launch the No-Code Architects Toolkit from the command line. It's going to boot everything up. It's going to build the container. This might take a few minutes and we'll fast forward through that process. It's on one of the final steps now. It's about to launch the server endpoint. All right, looks like it came up with an error. So now all we need to do is take this error and we will throw that back into our cursor app. And then it sees the issue. It's going to fix it. Looks like it added a new line here. We'll accept those changes. Didn't change anything else. Now we can come back to the command line again and we can try to run it again. See if it comes up with any new errors. No errors this time. So now that it's running, I'm going to jump over to Postman. And because we built this new endpoint inside of V1 Media, I'm going to copy an existing endpoint that we already used, the transcribe. I'm going to go ahead and copy this to create a new one since it has some of the same information in it. Then I'll come up here to transcribe. I'll turn this to download. Then I'm going to update the URL to V1 Media download. And this is already going to call my local machine up here. You can see that here. Then I'm going to come up to the body. And remember, the payload that we are sending the API is just media URL. So I'm going to remove everything else here. And now what we need is a TikTok URL instead of this URL. So let's jump over to TikTok. I'll grab this. Come back to Postman. Let's add this here. And then we will click send. So what we can see is the API was successful and it returned a new Cloud URL with our downloaded TikTok video on it, the one that we passed into the input of our API. And if we look at the actual API where the request came in, it received our request. Here is the video. It downloaded it, uploaded it to cloud storage. That was successful, and then it responded back to us with that URL. So if I take this, I can copy that. I can go back to the browser. I can just put that URL right here. I can download it. You can see that it downloaded. I can click on it, and you can see the TikTok here with no watermark. I can play it, and this is the exact video that we had here on TikTok. So now you can see from that experience, in this particular case, I had some insider knowledge of this particular toolkit that we're adding features to. So I had to enforce particular rules that I already knew. And I definitely had to go back and forth and correct a few errors. But at each step, you just have to keep your wits about you and think a little bit about what's actually happening. And then also, of course, you're going to gain experience as you learn how to do these things. But if you're patient and you walk through your projects in a similar manner, then you will have a lot of success. If you think about what we did here, it was very powerful. We were able to use Claude here to research the tool to help us build out our new API function. And then using Cursor, we were able to give it the requirements and then actually have it write all of the new code. And then by just getting through a few different errors that came up, we were able to launch and deploy the new feature. So now I would be able to come back to the terminal here. I could go ahead and I could cancel and get back to the actual code. I could do the git status, and then I could type git add app.py requirements and routes. These are the 3 files that were changed in order to add this new feature. So I can add those. I can do a git status again. You can see that it's now modified these files for deployment. I could do git commit added download to the toolkit. Now it's committed. Now I could do a git push origin, and then I'll add the feature here. Copy, upload. And then if I were to come back to GitHub, we can see that it just uploaded that new feature. I can click on that. You can see that it's going to go to that particular branch. And then we would be able to come into this requirements file. We would see that new library here. We could check out the other files. We changed the app.py. Here we've got app.py. And if we scroll down, we can see that it added the new media download endpoint. And then there's also this routes file. Go into routes, version 1, media, download. And here's the new code that was added by Cursor. So we were able to absorb this entire project and all of this experience into our project. And now our API has the new ability to download media. All right, so let's continue forward. We just added in the TikTok and IG Reels downloader, and this will work with other popular video downloading platforms as well. And also just keep in mind that I'm actually adding these to the toolkit. So if you're interested in using this toolkit, in just a few days, all of the features that I'm working on in this video are going to be available. So highly recommend you check out the NCA toolkit. And also, if you're interested in these topics and you want support, make sure to jump into the No Code Architects community. It's a thriving group. We've got an in-person event coming up next week. You can get tech support on any issue that you're having. We promise to solve 100% of all the tech support questions from our members. We've got a full classroom on AI automations and how to launch your own business, as well as access to all of my automation templates. And we have calls almost every single day. So now let's go ahead and add in the next endpoint. We're going to add an endpoint that allows us to convert media from one format to another. Think of any media conversion that you have in one format that you might want to convert to another format. We're going to add an endpoint that allows you to do that. Now, luckily for this particular endpoint, the tool that actually does that conversion, which is called FFmpeg, is already included in the toolkit. So we don't need to install an additional library like we did here with the YTDLP. In this case, we just need to add the endpoint. So now for this endpoint, I'm going to use a different tool other than Cursor. We can still use Cursor for looking at the code, but for this example, I'm going to use a different tool to generate the code. It's called Claude Code. It's a command line tool, and I'll show you in just a few minutes how that works. But first, I'm going to jump back to Claude. I'm going to create a new chat. And again, I'm going to start to brainstorm what I want to do. I want to create a new API endpoint for my Python toolkit that will convert media like video or audio to another format. The API endpoint will use FFmpeg. Please help me construct a API payload that will make sense for this type of project. Please don't write any code, just help me develop the API payload. So in this case, I know that FFmpeg will do the job, but I'm not exactly sure what commands that I need to run with FFmpeg to do this. So by going through this exercise, Claude's going to look up FFmpeg. It's going to understand how it does these conversions, and then it's going to help us create this payload here like we did for the media download. So let's just go ahead and see what it comes up with. So you can see it's developing that payload. And again, you can see that it's a bit more complicated than I like to start with. We can always add more to it, but the more complicated it is, the more likely it is to have issues. And it's also not necessarily following the same convention that our endpoint does with the media URL. So I'm going to ask it to make some modifications. Let's simplify the payload to include only the input URL that will accept a remote file from the web. We'll call that media URL, just like we did over here. Then let's allow the user to select the output format. And what I'm referencing is this here. We don't really need to pass the input format because if we're passing a file, it's going to know that. So we'll include the format, and then we'll also include the video and audio codec. You may or may not know, but all video files and audio files, there is a specific way that these files are encoded. And when you convert one format to another, you can either include the same codec or you can re-encode it. If you use the existing codec, it will process much faster. So I'm going to go ahead and say include the video and audio codec as well. So that looks like a more simple codec to get started with. And so what this is going to say is download this video turn it into a WebM format. It could just as well be a .mov. You might have seen that video format as well. And then it's saying convert the original video codec, whatever that is, into VP9 and the audio codec into Opus. And because I know FFmpeg a bit, when I create this endpoint, I'm going to make sure that this number one can be optional and that we can also pass copy and also probably to default to copy if nothing is added there. Let's jump back over to our terminal. We do a git status. We're going to remind ourselves that we're in the feature video download. So I want to git checkout build so that I get back to the build branch. I want to branch off the build branch. I don't want to build off of this feature branch. Otherwise, this new feature that I'm about to create will also be in this feature here, which we don't want. We want it separated. We want each feature in its own branch that we can independently merge back into the build branch. So I want to build a new branch off of the build branch. That was a tongue twister. So here we're going to say git branch feature media convert. So here it looks like I was already playing with a branch with a similar name. So I'll just change it to media converter. And then we'll do git checkout copy. So now we're in a new branch. And now this time we're going to use Claude Code. And if you want to use Claude Code, you can come here to these instructions and it will show you how to install it. So this is a command line tool. So I'll type Claude and it really works the same way, except you interact with it by entering in what you want to do here instead of cursor where you do it here. Now again, I'm going to close out all these files. I can still use cursor with Claude Code and do the review and editing of code here, but I'm actually going to use this tool to actually generate the new endpoint. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say, create a new endpoint called v1 media convert that uses FFmpeg to convert the input media to another format. Then I'm going to come back to Claude and I'm just going to copy this. And it's going to look a bit messy, but you can just continue typing. Use the sample payload above to construct the new endpoint. The video and audio codec are optional and can either contain copy or will default to copy if left blank, in which case you should copy the codec from the input to the output so that we don't always have to re-encode the files unless we want to. The response should include the output file with a payload that uses file URL. And again, I want to use file URL to be consistent with how the response usually is. Actually, looking here, I didn't use file URL. So before I actually commit these into production, I would definitely double check to make sure that I'm being consistent in the way that I'm responding in the response here. But just so we don't get caught up on technicalities, I'll just go ahead and leave this as is. And if we need to correct it, we can. I am going to cut and paste this just because sometimes I find that if I don't and I need to type it again for some reason, I have to retype the whole thing. I think that should be good. Let's go ahead and see how Claude Code does. So it works in a pretty similar way. It's going to evaluate all of the code that is in the directory that we were in. Periodically, it's going to ask us a question that we have to respond to. Here you can see it's asking if it can create the first file. And if we look here, we can see that it has created the services file to actually do the job. So I'll go ahead and say yes, go ahead and create. Now you can see here that it is creating the actual endpoint that we can call. We'll go ahead and say yes, go ahead and create. Now it's asking us if it can make changes to our app.py file. This should be starting to look a little bit familiar from what we did in Cursor. And again, if I come back to Cursor, because it's nice to be able to edit things, we can definitely see the changes that it's making. If we come to our routes here or the services file, we should be able to come in here, v1 media. Actually, before I do that, let's just go ahead and let this finish so that it can run in the background. Services media transform. So it looks like it's putting it in transform. I think it probably would have made more sense to do v1 media convert. What did I put here in the prompt? So it looks like I did put v1 media convert, and that's what it is naming it, but it ended up putting it in the transform folder. So that's pretty typical of AI. I might have seen something else in the code that used transform, and so it didn't use convert. If you wanted to change it, you could simply just say, make sure to put this in the right folders. It noticed that I already have help files, so it's asking us if I want to create a help file. We'll go ahead and say yes. So we'll jump back into cursor, and we see the transform here, and we see the media convert. So we have our file, and we can see that it's automatically setting the video and the audio codec to copy if it is not already there. So I'm just going to open up a new terminal so that Claude Code can continue to be here if we need to make changes. I'll go into the No-Code Architects Toolkit. I'll do local. We'll run it again from here. Let's see if there's any issues with the code. All right, it looks like it was able to boot up without any issue. So now we should be able to come back to Postman. We already have a transform folder here, so I'll just go ahead and piggyback off of that. We'll duplicate this existing one. I'm going to change this here to convert, and we'll need to change the URL here to media convert. And before I finalize this, I definitely would change the directory structure again so that it was proper. Then we'll jump back to body. In this case, we have this video here. So then if we come back and look at our format here, we have the media URL. Media URL, we don't need these other options here. What we need is the format, and I'll put MOV, and I'm going to leave the video and audio codec out, and let's just run this and see what happens. All right, so now it's telling us invalid payload, so it looks like it added this as output format, so we'll just change that. Send it again. Looks like it's running. Just going to double check the API here. Looks like it was able to download the original file, perform the conversion, and then it responded back. So if we come back to the API, it looks like it responded, and now we have an MOV file, and it looks like it's responding here with the response with the file URL, just as I requested, which is a bit different than what I had done in the download. So again, being consistent here is important. So a minor mistake, but easily correctable if we wanted to take the effort. So that worked just fine. So if I click on this, download that file, we can open it up. So now we have that same video file, except now it's a MOV file, but we could also turn it into a WAV file. So that would remove the video and just return audio. So let's turn it into a WAV. So now we have just a WAV file. So let's download that. So I downloaded that file. We can come here. I'm going to open it up in the folder, and we would be able to play that audio file. Can't hear it, but it's now an audio file. We could turn it into an MP3. Looks like it had an error. So let's take a look at what that was. So my guess is with the MP3 is that MP3s are a different codec. So it probably had an error when it actually tried to do the conversion. So that error is actually probably what you'd expect. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this error message, and I'm just going to go back to Claude Code. Then I'm going to type in an error, MP4 to MP3, maybe because you can't copy the codecs in this case. And then I'm going to paste the error message, and it's thinking about what just happened, and it's coming up with its idea. So now what you can see is it's adding a special case. File format is a specific type. It's going to automatically set the codec for us so that we don't run into that same issue. I'm going to go ahead and just accept it, and let's see what happens. And then it's updating the documentation. We'll let it do that. So now let's go ahead and cancel this so we can rerun it. We have to reboot the server once we make the changes. All right, so now the server has reloaded. Let's go ahead and try this again. We'll go ahead and send it. In this case, it was able to recover from the error, and now we're just going to open this, and we'll have an actual MP3 of that same video. All right, and so from here, if you are satisfied with your changes, you could go ahead and exit Claude Code. We could do a git status. We're going to see the various files that it added, so we can just say git add app.py, and then from here, we can just copy paste these. It's faster, just like that. We got a space there. Go back here, add the space, git commit, added new endpoint for media conversions. And then of course I could do the git push origin, and I could add in the feature, and I could just push that to the origin, just like that. If I jump back to GitHub, we're going to see that we just added the media converter 8 seconds ago. So we could test that individually from all the other features, and then ultimately once it was approved, we could merge that into the build branch. And then near the end of the video, I'll show you how we would merge everything from build back into main. All right, cool. So now we've got 2 features down and committed to GitHub. Let's keep going. Let's jump back to Cursor for this next one here. We're going to provide a media file and we're going to cut that or splice that into multiple parts. Let's say you had some video and for some reason you needed to cut it up into 3 pieces. Maybe you wanted to splice out this middle piece here and you wanted 1 and 3. You could pull these out and then maybe you could concatenate these back together. In fact, there is already a feature here for concatenating videos. So if we were missing the split feature in our endpoint, we could add that now. In fact, we are missing that. So let's come back to our command line and we'll go git checkout build, come back to the build branch, git branch feature, we'll call it splice video, git checkout. Looks like I misspelled it, but that's all right. Copy, checkout, feature, splice video, not splice. Now we can jump back to Cursor and we'll go ahead and start a new chat just so it's not operating with all of this old memory here. So here we are. So in this example, we could come back to Claude and then create a new chat on how to develop this new feature. In this case, again, I'm going to be using FFmpeg, which we already know. So I'll say if we were creating an API endpoint to splice a video with FFmpeg, what would the API payload look like? And I'll say don't write code. Let's just see what it comes up with. So it's giving us a lot of detailed options which we could come back and add later. So it looks like the way it's trying to design this is that it's taking it into source video. It's giving you the option of what type of source it is. Is it a URL or maybe it's a local file? We're not going to need that, but it's interesting to see what it comes up with, having these different operations. But what I'm thinking is like all we really need is the input URL and the times we want to split it at. Could we simplify the payload to include just the video URL and an array of timestamps to cut the video without any extra options? And again, I'm not thinking start and end times, although I guess that's fine. So this is going to do cuts this way. You could also do it just where you provide a specific time and it cuts it into parts. But let's just go with this for now. When you design your APIs, but let's just go with this for now. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to come back to Cursor. We'll say add a new endpoint called v1 video splice, or maybe we'll just call it cut, since it seems like that's more in line with what our payload looks like. And I'll say using the payload below, use FFmpeg to cut the original video into the parts specified and return an array of files. Make sure to upload the files to the cloud per as other endpoints do. All right, let's give it a go and see what it comes up with. All right, it added our cuts py. So this looks like the services file. And now it just added the route. So it built the route for us, all this code here. And now it looks like it's making the changes that it needs to the app.py file. And so we can see that here, added the py file. So let's see, there's the endpoint that it added. So I'm going to come back to the black box here, just make sure I'm in the right spot. We're in our feature splice video, although we renamed it to cut. And we've got our new files here. Let's just go ahead and run it, see if it comes back with any errors. All right, looks like it was able to start up properly. And we have our payload here. So I'm going to copy that, jump back to Postman. I'm going to jump into the video section. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the concatenate. So we'll name this to cut. We'll rename this to cut. Then we got the body. We'll replace that with our new. I'm going to take out the optional webhook that we don't use right now. Then I got to put in a real video URL there. Put that here. Now I believe this video is only 9 seconds. So I'm just going to do one. Well, I guess this is fine. No, this is 1 minute. So I believe this is minutes. So I'm going to go here to second 1 and second 2. And we'll make a second clip from second 3 to second 4. And let's just see what happens. So we should get back 2 videos. The first one is from second 1 to second 2, and that second video is from 3 to 4. Just to have a differentiation, let's move it from 3 to 5. And we've got our API running here. Let's go ahead and run it. So it received our video request. It created both files, uploaded both of them, and it responded with both of them. So let's see, let's open up segment 1, 2 seconds. Let's see here, let's play it. 1. So it's a 2-second clip, and then let's see what we got here. And this is a 5-second clip. So to me, it looks like maybe it wasn't really respecting the start time, because we had the end time 2, and then we had the end time here 5. So I'm just going to give this back to Cursor. I may have noticed an issue. I used the payload below, thinking the first video would be from second 1 to second 2, creating a 1-second video, and the second video was from, what was it, 3 to 5, but the video was 5 seconds long, leading me to believe it had an issue with the start time. I'll put in the payload that we used. Let's just see what it says. Oh yes, I see the issue. All right. So it seems like it found the issue. Let's see if it can correct it for us. So we will need to restart our server since the code has changed. All right, so everything booted up all right. Let's come back to Postman. Let's run our new process. Did the split, uploaded both files. Let's check them out. First one. What do we got here? All right, now it's 1 second. Perfect. And my guess is this one here will be 2 seconds. Perfect. So you can see the AI agent coding assistants aren't always perfect, but with a little bit of back and forth, you can always correct the issue. So from here, we could come back, break out of the server, do a git status, git add app.py, and then I'll do the copy paste here. Then we'll do the git commit, added a video cut endpoint. And then we could git push origin. And I believe if I wanted to, I could correct this here, put splice, so that on GitHub it was correct, or rename it to cut, whatever we wanted to do. Or maybe to do that, I need to put just like that. There we go. So what I was able to do is I was able to push to origin from here to there. And if we go up to GitHub and we refresh, we're going to see our splice video with the corrected feature name there. All right, so now let's jump into our last feature here. In this endpoint, what we are going to do is we are going to add the ability to overlay one video on top of another one at a given timeline. So let's say we had a video and there was a specific timeline here. And maybe at 10 seconds, we wanted to overlay another video on top of the original, maybe it's B-roll, and add it in on top of it, just for a few seconds, something like that. So we have the original video that is here and also here, but we're going to overlay this B-roll content into this section here. So for this, I would jump back to Claude. I would start a new chat. I need to add a new endpoint to my Python toolkit that already has FFmpeg. I need to design the payload for the endpoint. The endpoint should be able to overlay one video on top of another at a specific timestamp. In this case, I'm just going to assume that both videos are the same resolution, and we want to overlay the second video in the same position. And what I mean by that is if we have a video here, we're not going to overlay the other one here. It's going to be, right on top of the other one. So I'll be more verbose here. Overlay in the same position. I'll put same X, Y position. Help me design the payload for the API. Do not write any code. So I like to do it this way just because I get some insight into how the AI is thinking about this, and it also knows how to use FFmpeg. So it's a good place to start even if I change it. So this is good because it shows you some of the options. I don't know that we need any of these, but if you wanted one of the videos to have some opacity, you could change that. If you didn't want to use the full duration of the overlay. So there's some things here that you could change. So in this case, I think it's safe to simplify this. So let's assume a more simple solution. And then of course you can always add to it. Only input a video URL and an overlay video URL and a start time. Assume the overlay video will play the full video. Don't include the output or other options. So let's see what it comes back with. So here we can see that we're going to use this payload video URL, overlay video URL, and start time. What I like about this is that it shows you what's possible. It expands your horizon so that you could implement something like this, and then you could always come back to the AI code generator after it's working, and then it's going to add these other features without less issue. So that's why I'm doing it this way, is just to show you that you want to try to get something implemented that works so that you can layer on additional changes later on down the road. And it's going to be more successful adding in all of these variant options when it's already working with something that it knows that works. So in this example, let's go back to Claude Code. I'm going to open up the terminal. I'm going to go back to the build branch, git, checkout, build. We'll do git, branch, feature, overlay, video, git, checkout, feature. We'll jump back to cursor. You're going to see that these other files have disappeared because they don't exist in this branch. They only exist in the other branch. We don't really need the chat since we're going to use Claude Code. We'll type Claude. So here, let's go ahead and move forward. Help me add a new endpoint, v1/video overlay that will overlay one video on top another, assuming that both videos are the same size, and that will overlay the second video at the same offset. Again, what I'm just trying to articulate is that when it overlays the video, don't do it like this. Put it here. How did I say it in Claude? Yeah, same X and Y position. Let's just see how this goes. Help me add a new endpoint that will overlay one video on another, assuming both videos are the same size, and that will overlay the second video at the same offset so that both videos are at X, Y, 0, 0. Assume the overlay video will play in full, and the only option is when it starts on the original video. Send the payload to give it some context, and then let's let it fly. My gut's telling me that that could have been a little bit more clear, but let's see how it does. So it's analyzing the code. We can jump back to cursor, and this is where we'll be able to open things up and look at it before committing it. And definitely one thing I like about Claude Code is that you can see it's looking at a lot of the other files just to kind of understand how everything was built, so that when it builds new features, it does them in a way that's consistent with the rest of the code. I think Cursor is doing the same thing, but my gut tells me that Claude Code does that a little bit better. So here we can see that it's asking us if we want to edit a file. And I just happen to know that this is an older file. So in this case, I'm actually going to say no, which is kind of cool that you can stop it. Do not add anything to existing files. Make a new endpoint and service file in the routes v1 and services v1 folders, respectively, as other v1 routes do. So it's funny that I mentioned that it seems like Claude does a good job of analyzing previous code, and the one time I say that, it actually kind of does it a different way. So now you can see it's going into the routes in the version 1. It just so happens that I have some old code in here for backwards compatibility for some previous applications that I've ran. So I have the old code here too, separated by these V1 folders. So you can see here it's looking at some other routes and service files to do it right this time. Looks like it's creating the service file first. We can go ahead and say, yes, go ahead and create. And now it's also created the routes file. We'll go ahead and say create. Then it's going to update the app file to create the endpoint. Then it's asking us if we can edit the app.py file. We'll go ahead and say yes. And if you get tired of saying yes to everything, you can always use the second option. But stepping through it and being patient isn't such a bad thing. Sometimes, just like you saw, it's asking you to do something that you don't want it to do, and you can say, no, please do something else. I think one of the funny things about all of this AI stuff is that we go from having to do a ton of work to not having to do as much. And sometimes we see that and we don't want to do anything. So we just say, yeah, just do whatever you want. And just doing a little bit gets you a lot further than trying to do absolutely nothing. So like, if you think about the return on investment, typically you have to do all of this work, and instead maybe you do that much work. If it works, that's a huge investment or a huge return on your investment. If you try to shortcut things too much, sometimes you actually shoot yourself in the foot because it makes too many errors this way. So slowing down and seeing what it's doing and giving it permission to move forward is sometimes the better option. It wants to create a help file. We'll let it do that. All right, so now it looks like it's done. So I'm going to open up another terminal. We'll bring this over. Let's go ahead and run it. So in this case, we've got Claude Code over here, and we've got the actual server running over here. This is going to take a few seconds to build out. Looks like it started up without any issues. So now what we need to do is just come back to Postman. We're in the video section here again, so we can just go ahead and duplicate this cut. And this time we're going to rename this to overlay. Overlay. And then we need to change the body. We can go to the video section. Here's the overlay. We can see the code that it added. That's the services file. We need to go to the route. So we've got the video URL, the overlay video URL, the start time. And so that looks perfect. So let's come back here. So now that we have this, now we got to put in real URLs. So I'm going to use this vertical video. And then I need to find another one. Actually, I'm going to use some different files here. I've got an overlay here. We'll overlay this at 3 seconds so we don't have to watch too long. And I have this other horizontal video. So we've got a horizontal video and we have an overlay video. This is the horizontal video that I've got. And then here's some B-roll that we'll put on top of it. So let's go ahead and see how this works. We've got our server here. And so let's go ahead and run this. All right, so we have an error here. Received video overlay request. Filterable stream object has no input. So I'm just going to copy this into Claude Code. See what it comes up with. All right, so it looks like it made some changes here. We'll go ahead and let those changes finish up. And let's give it a try again. Then we'll have to restart the server. Looks like everything started up okay. Let's come back to our Postman. We can test everything out. Received the overlay request, doing the processing. Haven't had an error yet. Looks like it was able to finish. It uploaded the video. Let's come back to Postman. There it is. Let's take a look. Here's the video. Let's play it. So remember, we asked it to add the overlay at 3 seconds. So we should see that pop up at that moment. Let's play it. And there's the overlay. Overlay, I think, was 10 seconds. So after that 10 seconds, it should go back to the other video. And right about now, oh, look at that. Okay, so we got a little error. Never went back to the original. So we can go back to Claude Code. This worked, but it looks like after the overlay video ended, it never went back to the original. So it wants to make a new change. We'll let it make both changes. I think one of the most interesting things that I've found as I've gotten into this is that sometimes you'll do something that's super complex and it'll be super easy. Other times you'll be doing something that seems super easy and it'll just kind of go in loops. Asks us to do one more thing. And you spend more time on the more simple things. So it looks like it's done. Let's see if it was able to correct that. One of the best things I can tell you is that this is going to help you move a lot faster. But of course, you're going to gain experience as you go through these different things. So try to keep things simple, learn as you go. All right, seems to work okay. Let's try to run the process. So it's processing now. Learn, experiment, play around, learn how to deal with different things, different errors, different situations. Use Claude to help you through things. There's all this work that normally needed to be done. What we're doing here would normally have taken an average developer days or months to do, and we're doing it in a few hours. But what happens is when people use AI, they expect it to do that instead of just doing this, right? You have a little more patience and you learn and you work with it and you get a lot further. All right, so it gave us back our video. At the 3-second mark, we should see our overlay. There it is. And then, okay, and then it goes back. Perfect. So we got it. So now what we could do is come back to Claude Code, git status, git add app.py, the doc file, the routes file, and the services file. Git commit, added a B-roll overlay endpoint, git push origin push. Boom, there we go. Go to GitHub, refresh, and now we've added our video overlay feature as well. So in just a few minutes now, we've added 4 really cool features for content automation into a free API that we can use all day long without having to pay any money. And this replaces fairly expensive APIs that you would pay potentially hundreds of dollars a month for, especially if you're at high volume doing some of these things where you're using Appify to download these TikToks or IG Reels or whatever type of video you're trying to download, convert them into other types, cut them apart, add B-roll, and then think about what else you could add. Kind of the sky's the limit. All right, so along the way, I've already shown you how we actually check those features back into GitHub. But now let's talk about how would we actually deploy one of these new features using Git once we've tested one of these features and it's ready to go and we want to pull it into our build, which ends up being kind of like our staging area. So if you think about the flow of how this works is you have the main branch, which is this is production. This is what the average person wants to use, right? They don't want to go through the process of encountering bugs or helping you test anything. They just want to use the tested good version, right? So that's the main branch. And then we have the build branch, which is where we take all of these individual features and when they're ready, we roll them into the build branch. So now I'm not necessarily ready because these haven't actually been tested by anybody else. I'm not actually ready to push these into the build branch and people actually use this. I don't want to actually push anything in there, but I want to show you what that process might look like. So I'm going to make another branch here that's very benign. It doesn't actually have any code in it. So let's see, git status, where are we at right here? So I'm going to git checkout build. Going to go back to the build branch. I'm going to make a git branch feature YouTube demo. Then I'll do git checkout just so I can show you what that looks like. So I've checked out the fake feature that was just built off the build branch. I'm going to go into cursor here, and I'm just going to go into documentation. So I'm going to go into this README file. No, not the README file. I'll go into one of these other document in here somewhere. Let's go into the code. We'll go in here, and I'll just add an enter at the end, just so we have some sort of change. So I'll do a git status, and you're going to see that we've modified this file. If we do a git diff, we added a new line at the end. That's it. So I could do a git status, git add. We'll add this here. And then we'll git commit text change in document for YouTube demo. So because we're not changing any code, just changing a document, it's really not that big of an issue. And then from here, we can do git push origin, and we'll push this up to GitHub. We'll go up to GitHub, and here we're going to see our YouTube demo. We can click into it, and then we can actually see the change here. So what's cool about GitHub is that the whole point of it is that so multiple people can work together. You can have these different branches that don't interfere. Individual people can check out these branches, test them, and then when they're ready, we can move them into the build branch. So what I can do here is I can do a compare and pull request, and I'm going to move this request into the build branch. So again, remember, we always, in this particular setup here for the No-Code Architects Toolkit, we always push our changes into the build branch. Then a developer would be able to say, whatever they did, in this case, I'm going to put just a demo commit into the build branch for a YouTube demo. So I'm going to take our YouTube demo code and I'm going to put it into the build branch and we'll create the pull request. These errors here are just because there are some limitations in terms of how we get stuff into the code or the build branch. So now these errors are just a warning. There's a rule on this repository that we don't allow pull requests without somebody actually reviewing them, but I can bypass that because it's my repo. We'll bypass the rules and merge, confirm bypass and merge. So now it was merged into the build branch. So if we come back to the No-Code Architects, so now we can see the build branch has a recent push. We can click into that. And now we're going to be able to look at the commits here. So this is going to show us all the things that have been pushed into the build branch. And you can see here is that commit that we just added right here. And if we looked at it, we can see the change and it's just that new line. So it shows you the comparison. So it's really kind of cool. It's very easy to see what's happening, compare changes, manage multiple features, pull them into the build branch. And there's also another cool thing here, which is once we push something into the build branch, there's this GitHub action that runs, which actually increments the build number. So if I come in here, I'm not going to be able to explain all of this code, but essentially what it's doing is when there's a new commit, it increments the build branch, which is this variable here. So every time we push into the build branch, it increments this number here. And therefore, when we're using our endpoints, is it still running here? Yeah. We can see here build number 36. So when we're testing, and if there's an issue, I can ask somebody, hey, what build are you using? And they can say, oh, I'm using 136. I could come here and say, oh, well, the current build number is da-da-da-da-da. So you're on a different version. Then we can work together to figure out, what the issue is. So that was the main branch. But if I go into the build branch, we'll see that it should be 137. So if somebody were to report a bug, they could say, hey, I'm on build 136. Well, I could say, well, before I even spend any time on this, make sure you're on the most recent build 137. And then that way, if you're still having the bug, then let me know because it might have been fixed in this new branch. And so quick reminder, even if you're here to learn how to use AI to code, make sure to check out the No-Code Architects Toolkit. It's a free tool that allows you to do a lot with AI automations and helping you eliminate API subscriptions that you might have. It does a lot of different things. Make sure to check it out and let me know what you think. And so now that we've shown examples where we used Claude Code to add new features or using Cursor's built-in functionality with their chat, which one do I like better? Well, right now I'm using both. Because from a user's perspective, it's a lot nicer to have the chat right here integrated and not have to go to Claude Code, which is in the terminal, and use it here. So from a user standpoint, user experience standpoint, definitely like Cursor better with this chat. However, I've just found that a lot of the time, Claude Code does a better job. But we also saw in this example where Claude Code, in some cases, it didn't do as good a job. Realistically, what I do is I have both of these open. If I run into something where I'm going in a loop in Cursor and it just keeps giving me bad output and I can't get through it, then I'll jump over into Claude Code. Or I might start with Claude Code because it seems to work better. And if I hit an issue here, then I'll jump back to Cursor. So right now, I'm not sure there is a clear winner. I would use them both and toggle back and forth between one or the other, depending on what is working the best in that given moment. So now finally, what is the number one insight that you need to know if you want to get involved with coding and using AI agents to help you code? And the main thing is that, and I've been hinting along the way, is that all of these different agents, they do really well a lot of the time, and then sometimes they don't. And sometimes you have to work with these different agents until they provide the right answer. And so you want to do a little bit of research before you actually do the code. Spend some time in Claude talking about the solution that you're trying to build. What are the different tools out there that already do what you want to do? Just like I have the No-Code Architects Toolkit, which is a free tool. And just like how we used this tool here to download TikToks, there are these existing projects that do the thing that we want to do. But if we were to go into Cursor without that knowledge and just say, hey, build me a TikTok downloader, it might actually try to build this whole project from scratch, in which case it's going to have a much harder time actually achieving the goal. Now, maybe Cursor at that moment or Claude Code at that moment was smart enough to know that this tool existed, and it would go and it would download it just like the same way we did. But you don't know that it's going to do that. So if you go to Claude or you go to ChatGPT and you go through these research and building and collaboration mode, and you use it just to talk through what you're trying to do and to ask it various unknowns that you don't know, or to give it insight on things you do know and where it should start from, and talking to it about what the output should actually look like. Doing some of this initial research is the difference between it working and it not working. And then the other insight is just that for whatever reason, when people go and they use AI, there's all this work that we used to have to do. It could be months worth of work. But for whatever reason, I've noticed that when we use AI, we want it in seconds. We don't want to wait at all. But there's this middle ground where maybe you spend a few hours doing a little bit of research, articulating your idea, getting some insight, narrowing things down, coming up with some frameworks or some existing projects that you can pull from. And that little bit of research, it does take a little bit more time, but we're taking months worth of work and turning that into maybe one day or a few hours. But the people that go here and want it in 3 seconds, I mean, sometimes you're going to get it, right? So you saw in our example today that it didn't have errors every time we built something. I mean, that is the ideal. I want it to happen in 3 seconds as well. But when it doesn't, be willing to put in that one day in exchange for 1 month. And I know this sounds silly, but a lot of people don't have this kind of patience with AI for some reason. It's just like, if I don't get it in 3 seconds, it doesn't work. But develop that muscle to do the research, and you'll do a lot better. Now, if you found this video interesting, make sure to check out the No Code Architects community. It's an active group, people helping people. I'm in here helping people directly. We have community members helping community members. We have guaranteed tech support for any issue that you have. We solve 100% of our members' issues. We've got beginner courses, all of my automation templates. If you're trying to build a business with AI, I've got a business clarity course. We've got support calls almost every single day. And on April 5th, we actually have a live meetup in Newport, California. I'd love to see you there. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.